it kind of brings us to the last Vance clip that I wanted to get to here, which is gets into the reason he thinks that European governments fear free speech.
The organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership.
Okay, so the context here for viewers who are not following German politics is that a German party called the AfD was poised to do very well or surprisingly well in the election, which was shortly after the speech. In fact, they did do fairly well. They came in second place, gained 69 seats. So it's a real force, and it's obvious why any inkling of a far right rising in Germany freaks people out. It's particularly uncomfortable for this show to talk about with our two German last names hosting. But what
I
do you
didn't
think?
notice that.
Zach was telling me about how he's learning Edelweiss on the piano. Suspiciously Austrian. Mm-mm.
What do you think of Vance's notion that the fear of populism is motivating a lot of these speech crackdowns, and that leaders should resist that fearful instinct?
Oh, well, it's definitely motivating those speech crackdowns. I mean, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but we found countless instances of people talking behind the scenes about suppressing populist movements. And they would even use the word populism. But there's a crucial difference here, which is that the German Constitution has this kind of abjectly undemocratic feature to it that we don't have in our system, which allows the government and the intelligence services to monitor political parties, and if they are seen to be drifting too far towards a direction they've already traveled and had a bad experience with, then they can be suppressed legally. And we don't have anything like that in the American system. And the question is whether that's being abused at the moment, and is also being used as a rationale for these speech crackdowns. What I think is most dangerous for the Europeans is that sometimes these things are self-fulfilling, right? Like, so they use the techniques, they use all these different laws. Germany has a very expansive speech law called the NetzDG, the Network Enforcement Act, which allows them to go after all kinds of different types of misinformation. And one of the categories that they don't like to see spread is negative information about stories connected to immigration. So here's what happens when you suppress immigration stories. People see the effects, then they see that the information about it is being suppressed, and they get even angrier, and they move toward a more radical position than they might have previously. And now all of a sudden you're looking at the two biggest parliamentary blocs being conservative, and one of them being, sort of far to the right, which I don't think they would have happened if there had not been such an open government effort to kind of push people away from that direction.
I was reading The Guardian the other day, and there's a great headline: how far-right parties across Europe are cannibalizing the center-right. And there's this idea of like, first it was the freak out that Marine Le Pen's going to rule France and destroy everything, and then AFD is going to bring a new Nazi movement. And it's like, well, when those fears don't really fully pan out, then the question is, oh, well, is the far right actually secretly glomming onto the center-right and pulling it further to the right? Do you notice any sort of trend, and is there anything we can learn from this weird dynamic that just keeps getting repeated all over Europe?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, I think, right? I mean, we just went through this here in the US, I think. The more measures that you pull out to try to stop a populist movement, and if you do it in a way that the people perceive to be as unfair or as putting a thumb on the scale, which they do with media, they do with censorship, um, they will end up losing faith in kind of the middle, and they will throw their support towards a group that has no association with the political establishment. And it doesn't have to be on the right, by the way. I mean, Europe has also had uprisings of the populist left. In fact, this really started, I think, in the mid 2010s with the Five-Star movement in Italy, right? There was also the Syriza in Greece, which was this is all around a little bit after the Occupy Wall Street movement here in the U.S. And um, those movements freaked out leaders just as much as the far right movements do now. Then there's the Gilets Jaunes, right? The Yellow Vest movement. They don't like that either. And when you suppress either, what ends up happening is the center gets discredited. And that's the inevitable punchline to all these stories. They would not learn here in the United States. Every time they kind of pulled out some kind of sort of heavy-handed method to try to suppress Trump, he gained in the polls. It was like a 100% tendency, and they just kept doing it. So I don't know. I don't. It seems like they're not capable of learning on that front.
Hey, that was a clip from Just Asking Questions. You can watch another one here or the full episode here. And please subscribe to our brand new channel to get us started off right and be notified when new episodes or clips go up. Thanks for watching.